This is Doug, and I wanted to talk today about doing hyperlapse during a sunset with your Mavic Air 2. And I want to be clear, this is about the sunset part, the time between 10 or 15 minutes or 20 minutes before the sun goes down and 5 or 10 minutes after the sun goes down. This is not about the golden hour. The golden hour, both in the morning and evening, requires a whole different set of parameters, different usage, different everything. So this is not golden hour discussion. This is just hyperlapse for the sunset. Okay, first thing is you don't need filters. They will serve no purpose for this type of hyperlapse or video. If you've got filters on your drone, take them off, and don't have a need for them, so please don't use them. Okay, the next thing is don't fly too far away. It takes about 17 minutes to do a 20-second hyperlapse. That's taking a picture every 2 seconds, and that's the parameters I'm talking about here. 2-second intervals. I know you can do 3, 4, 5, and so on, but I prefer 2. You're going to get a smoother playback with your hyperlapse, and it'll look a lot better, I think. So use the 2-second intervals, and then I like a 20-second hyperlapse, maybe a 25-second hyperlapse. But a 20-second hyperlapse takes 17 minutes to produce. That's 500 individual snapshots every 2 seconds. The 25-second hyperlapse will take about 20 minutes to produce, and it's taking 625 individual images. If you fly too far away, let's say you get a quarter mile out to get to a spot that you like or whatever, you have to fly out there, set it up. If you want to do any waypoint movement or anything other than just sitting still, which is the way I've done mine, you're going to be using up some battery and time, which is more precious than the battery perhaps, but you're going to be using up both. And if you take 20 minutes to do a hyperlapse, and then it takes almost a minute or 2 minutes to process it, you're going to be running out of battery and do a forced landing a quarter mile away. And that's not something you want to have happen. Now, the fact is that you don't need to go forward at all. Remember, this is a sunset. The clouds are way over there somewhere. They're not really on top of you. I mean, there are clouds up there, but the ones you're taking a picture of are out there. The sun is out there. That's what you're interested in. The foreground is somewhat important, but not really much at all. It provides, especially at the end, a silhouette. And that is interesting. If it's perfectly flat, it's a little dull, but if it's got some humps and bumps or trees or anything like that, that's interesting. But again, it's the foreground, and it's going to darken up as you take the hyperlapse, and you won't really see any detail there. So moving forward and getting to some spot that's way far away from where you are isn't really going to be critical for your hyperlapse. So best thing is just go up 200 or 300 feet, set your gimbal to get the angles just the way you like it, and with enough foreground, but not too much, by the way. Maybe instead of the rule of thirds, I would say almost the rule of sixths. So about halfway down through your grid, if you're using a grid on your smartphone or whatever. So about the rule of sixths on this, because the sunset's about the sky and the clouds, not the foreground. Okay. And obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but this sunset we're talking about some clouds out there. If you're just taking a clear sky, this video isn't for you because we're not looking at that kind of a sunset. We want to get some clouds. We want to get the movement of the clouds as they shift, and we want to get the colors as the sun goes down, going from yellows and light pinks to a deep orange or red, depending on each sunset you get. And sometimes they just go from sort of pink to gray and then black. You never know. And that's one of the big challenges you've got. The first time you go out, the first many times you go out, you may not get the sunset that you hope for or are looking for, but eventually you'll get what you want. Okay, the next item is when to start the video or the hyperlapse. When you start to see some color in the sky, you can start your hyperlapse, whether it be pink or gold or light colors. Start it up, and hopefully that's about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes before sundown. Let's assume sundown or sunset is 5:15. You're probably going to be starting at around 5 o'clock, maybe 5:04, 5:03, 5:05. If you do a 20-second hyperlapse, that'll give you plenty of good light early on and plenty of dark light later on for the rich colors, and that's what you're really looking for. And there will be color after sunset, definitely, so you want to look for that. Sometimes you don't get pink, you just get gray. Now that doesn't mean you're not going to have a great sunset. That's the kicker about these things, you never know what you're going to get. So if you're not seeing any pink and it's 10 minutes before the sunset time, let's say 5:05 instead of 5:15, then start your video or start your hyperlapse then at 5:05 and see how it plays out. The gray might turn into color, it might not, but if you wait too much longer, you're just going to get, well, you'll miss an opportunity. You just don't know what it is. And that's the trick about these. You never know. Each sunset is going to be totally different. Some of them are very dramatic. Some of them are less dramatic and very colorful. Sometimes you just get a lot of great cloud movement without a lot of color, but that can actually be quite a video. Okay, and the final thought, and this is probably the most important thought of all, is setting the ISO to 100, so you get the maximum resolution you can get, and do a manual setting of the shutter speed. Do not run it on automatic. If you run it on auto from the beginning of the hyperlapse, the camera is going to want to keep that great exposure with that bright sky and the good foreground all exposed so you can see it all. That's not what you want. You want the colors to deepen and darken and get more full and more rich. And if you have it on auto, you're just going to get a nice 20-second hyperlapse that looks all about the same because it keeps adjusting its own shutter speed and exposure to give you that look. What you want to do is set it on manual, so ISO 100, and you're looking at the sun, so your first initial shutter speed might be 1,000th of a second or even 800th of a second. You might think, that's pretty fast, that's not really what I want, but it is, trust me. So set that, get a nice exposure, just move your settings and get your shutter speed so that it looks good, and that's a good first image, and that's where you want to keep it. Start your hyperlapse, don't touch that shutter speed. And finally, at the end, remember hyperlapse has to process. And if you take a 25-second video, a hyperlapse, and it tells you when it's done, it says, we're done, and it has to process. Do not change anything. Don't hit the buttons, don't hit the stop, don't hit the record, don't hit anything else, because the processing takes quite a while. Certainly while you're waiting there for your drone battery to die and come back to home and all this good stuff. You watch the dial and it'll be blank for a while. It'll just be the red dot or the red circle, and nothing will happen, and you're thinking, what is going on? What is happening? You won't see a thing. And then pretty soon it'll start to show up and say 1 second, 2 seconds, and you'll see the countdown of now it's processing that hyperlapse. Let it finish to the very end. As soon as it does, it's probably time for you to bring your drone back because your battery is going to be pretty close to being depleted.
Let's take a look at some actual videos that I did. And this is one of my first ones. And two things I did wrong. I set it at 1080p. I did not correct it to 4K. And this was an auto exposure. In my eyes, this got very dark and very colorful, but the camera kept the exposure proper for auto setting, and you never did get the deep colors. Big mistake. This one was also only one real major flaw, well, two. I shot it at 1080p, and I got a little bit too much of the foreground. As you can see, it really doesn't add a whole lot to the image. I should have dropped it down just a little bit, the gimbal, and gotten more sky, but not too bad for 1080. On this one, I finally shot it in 4K and realized what I was doing wrong in some of the other videos, but I started filming too early. It looks great, and the colors are going to start to show up. The sky's deepening, and the clouds are looking pretty good, but I actually ended up ending the video and then having to restart a second part right here, and just did a little 5 second with more deeper colors. And this is my final video. Not a whole lot of color here. It is 4K, but I do like the movement of the clouds. It's pretty dramatic. And right at the very end, there is just a touch of color showing up. And that was really the best color. Right after this color showed up, it all went gray. You never know what you're going to get. That's the fun of doing these things. Well, let's do a little recap here. First off, no filters. You just don't need them. Don't go too far. You don't want to have a forest landing out there someplace. And record at first color. Let's hope you get some color. You never know what you're going to get. Be sure and set it to 4K. 1080p is okay, but 8K is no good. And the camera setting to manual, really, really important. And lastly, be sure and have fun and keep trying. And keep trying is definitely true. You never know what you're going to get. Lastly, thanks a lot for watching. Really glad you stopped by. And stay safe out there and happy flying.